Okay, so today what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about how we prepare the window opening to install our window. First thing first, we've got 3 rules that we like to follow. There's multitudinous different ways to do this. You'll see lots of diagrams, lots of videos such as this, and lots of opinion about it as well. I sort of have 3 rules, and that's rule number 1 is make sure the materials are compatible, so that our tapes and our adhesives and our papers and all those types of things are compatible, and even what we're covering the wall with later. Things like cementitious stucco and things like that aren't compatible with different materials, so you have to do your research that way. Second thing, and that's when we're physically putting this material on the wall, is we always make sure that we shingle lap everything. What I mean by shingle lap is basically we want to make sure that everything flows downhill like this, okay? So we don't ever want to have a situation where we've got water that can go in behind tapes and get trapped, so we always want it this way. I guess the analogy is water off a duck's back, okay? And then we don't want to do anything that's going to trap any moisture. Should we have a failure on the wall, or if water gets in behind the cladding, whether it be siding or brick or whatever, we don't want it to trap. That's why we've gone to all the extent of putting this moisture barrier on the wall, so that we can have a nice drain plane in behind our cladding system, so it comes out the bottom, hits a piece of flashing or whatever, and then kicks away from the wall assembly, because the whole point is not to get any moisture in our wall assembly. That's pretty general, but once you're finished your application, what I always do is I stand back and I look at what I did and ask myself, does it make sense? Quite often, you can do these things. We're looking very closely. If you stand back and just take a little look, sometimes you'll see somewhere you've got a piece of paper that's lapped the wrong way, or you've left a void, or something's not quite right. Just make sure it makes sense. Okay? So, starting with our preparation is we want to make sure that we have an adequate sill dam. This area here at the bottom of the window, we've started already. We've got our first piece of peel and stick membrane that's compatible with our Tyvek or a moisture membrane. We've added a strip of wood, which is our sill dam. What this does is it takes up some of the gap in the window that we had, because remember, our rough opening is wider than or larger than our actual window opening, so some of that is taken, so it kind of shims the window up, if you will. But the theory here, and that's it'll become evident a bit once we get the rest of our membranes on, if any water or moisture should happen to get behind our window once it's installed, it hits this area here and it can't go back inside our house or our wall assembly. We will be leaving it open at the bottom at a later time, so any moisture that does dam up on this area is free and clear to drive down the rest of our water plane, which is what is sort of desirable. Okay, so there's our window dam. Next maneuver is to prep the rest of our opening, which is just left open and raw at the moment. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to go up the sides. So this particular peel and stick membrane, we're just going to take the strips off the back side. It's like a big band-aid. And some of you may notice we're not using a primer. We use this in here because we're in a nice controlled environment and it works quite well without a primer. If we were outside in the cold with the frost and that kind of load and different products, we would definitely be using a primer, just a paint-on, 2-part adhesive sort of system. So we've already gone ahead and we've gone up the inside of the rough opening with the jam. We've been careful to make sure that this piece overlaps our sill dam that we talked about, and this piece is actually overlapped this piece, so we're shingle lapped in the correct direction. You don't do it all in one piece because it's really sticky. We want to keep the most wrinkles out of it as possible. So now we're ready to come around the corner. So we're just going to put a little bit of tension on our peel and stick membrane, come down over top, gently apply it on the corner, and we feather it out. I always say it's kind of like patting your pet dog or something. You just gently move it like that so that we don't get a lot of wrinkles. And then up like so. So we've got it positioned where we want. This piece is overlapping that piece. This piece is overlapping this piece. This piece is ready to be overlapped by another piece to get us all the way to the top. One thing we need to do to make sure that it adheres is use a compression roller. So So it's basically like a rubber roller. And what we do is we just apply a lot of pressure, and we roll the product out to make sure we've got good adhesion the whole way. It's almost like you can't do this enough, so you really want to make sure that it's adhered properly. Now we're ready to put our second piece on. This is what we're going to apply the window flange on once we get the window installed in the opening. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to do our final piece now that our sides are all the way up to the top on both sides. We're going to put this across the top. So we're just going to take this one works just a little bit differently. We need to insert a piece of tape at the top in a few minutes, and we'll go over that in a bit. Take that off. So we're going to just put that halfway across the top so that we can come down over top. We're a little bit wider than the sides. Lay it out like that. Now what we have to do is just put 2 small incisions up the side. Careful not to disturb what we have at the top. There we go, and now we can move it into the opening again, starting at the middle area and gently going out at an angle to make sure we get it in. So there we have it. We just have to roll that with the compression roller. Now what we've got here is we've got a whole area nice and clean that will take our window opening. We've got a waterproof dam. Next step is just to put the window in, and then we'll carry forward with how we're going to seal that in later. Okay, so now we're going to prep the opening for the window. So I'm going to take a generous bead of silicone down both sides and continuously across the top. And we're staying fairly close to the opening because we want to make sure that the flange of the window covers and penetrates into the nail holes. Okay, so now we have the silicone continuous up the side, across the top, down the other side. Note how we have not applied silicone to the bottom. Again, once the window goes in, if we do have a failure or penetration of moisture anywhere along the window, we have our sill dam to guard us against any moisture getting into our wall assembly, and we've got a free and clear plane for the water to move through. Okay, so now we're ready to put the window in. Basically, we're going to set the bottom in. We'll tip it in so it settles into our silicone, and then we'll just nail it in place. All the way in the bottom. All the way, keep going. Pick it up. Oops. Just going to temporarily tack it in place. Just quickly. That's just loosely going to hold our window in until we have a chance to shim it up, which we need to do on the inside to make sure we're centered in the opening and make sure that the window is straight up and down or plumb. Okay, now that we have our window in, if you look closely, obviously it's very crooked. That has to do with the sill where it's sitting. So what we've done is we've had an assistant on the outside put one nail in the flange on the high side of the window. What I mean by that, if we put our level on here, we'll find this is the high side and this is tipping down. It's a little bit better to use the level on the side. Now these are vinyl jamb windows, so we have to sort of squeeze the jamb because they tend to bend a little bit to get as close as we can. So either by using maybe a simple pry bar, squeezing with the level, I can insert that either at the bottom if I have a long rectangular window, but in our case I think we're just going to go in closer to the top. And we're just going to get our assistant to hop on the ladder and get a nail up at the top. I got it. I got it. Yeah. And when I say we'll get him to put a nail in there, so we're just going to roll the window over with our shim till we see what we like on our level. Okay, go ahead. And we'll get our assistant just to put the nail in there. Perfect, so we just let the window relax a little bit. Check the other side to make sure everything's good there. Again, squeeze that vinyl gem and make sure that we're plumb. What we've done is we've left a fairly consistent area for the insulator. We'll put some low expandable foam towards the exterior of that gap. Our insulator will later tuck in some fiberglass insulation that we would normally use in our wall cavity to make up the difference. You want to fill that area full of expandable foam. It can actually expand to the point where it can move the jamb in, and then later on the finish carpenter will have difficulty getting this jamb straight so they can get the casing on so we have a nice perfect rectangle. And that's about it. We just have to finish nailing it up, and then we'll move to putting building envelope and some peel and stick membrane on the outside. Okay, so now our window's in, it's all ready to go. We finished all the nailing. Now we're going to move to the same material. This is just 4 inches wide. I may have neglected to mention before we were using 6-inch wide material before. Depending on what you're trying to achieve, you can get different widths, obviously. So this stuff is super nice. One of the reasons we use it in the lab here is we can take one side off, makes it a little bit easier. This side's not sticky yet. We still have the backing on. Again, just pull it under tension. We're starting at the bottom. We'll work our way to the top. Again, a little bit difficult to manage at that distance. Basically, just make this even, and then we just come in so we're covering the flange to just touch the window and gently lay it down. Again, not forcing any movement with it to avoid any wrinkles. There we go. Now it's just a question of peeling this back piece off. Super easy to do this to avoid wrinkles. Pretty nice product. And then again, we'll start in the middle, come towards me, and then down on a 45 to avoid wrinkles, and up at a 45 to avoid wrinkles. And again, we'll just grab our compression roller, give it a lot of pressure. Make sure we get down on top of the flange. I want to make sure that the fasteners that we've used to hold the window in are nailed, and in our case nails as flush as possible so that this fits over nicely, and any other material that we're going to put on top. So we're going to continue on now. We'll add a piece overlapping this on the way up, and then we'll repeat the other side. Okay, so starting at the bottom, we've got our side flashes up over our bottom original sill dam. Again, just nice to note this is left open. We're finished here, nothing else happens. So we've got that drain plane. And as we look up the side, again, did it in 2 pieces. So this piece is overlapping that piece. So we're shingle lapped the correct way. And then we continue all up to the top. Now it's time for our head flash. This is the final piece. We're gonna move back to the 6-inch wide material again. I've pre-cut the piece so that it extends wider than anything else that we've done in the past. It is going to sit on the surface, but in a moment you'll see the rest of the plan is for this window. So we're just, be careful, sticky stuff. Get some tension on it. And again, very carefully, come in slowly and controlled, so we're covering the nailing fin. I'm just gonna lay that on there. It's just so important not to rush it. We'll bring that down, and then up and away. Avoid any wrinkles, and there we go. Okay, so now that we have our 6-inch piece, you'll notice we've got this gable Tyvek building envelope on here. We're tied to this plane. What we're going to do later is we'll have a piece of drip cap flashing that will kick any surface water out over on top of the window, our decorative batt, and then a second piece of flashing, and we may extend in behind this, but we definitely will come up in behind it so our water flow will go this way on our surface. So that's how we deal with something like this. Other applications, we would have cut into this paper beforehand. Well, we've also got another detail coming up here, and sometimes it gets a little bit complex, but we'll leave that like that for now. Some of you just may see this on the video and wondering why we haven't had this under anything, but we will when we get there. And that'll be in our next part when we do all these surface flashing details.